Harboring Grudges. Is There a Remedy? By Pascal Boute. There are no accompanying photos for this article. However, a holiday graphic and greeting appear in the print version immediately following. A description of the graphic and the text of the message are included at the end of this section as well. Pascal's article begins. In this house we do not provide free rent to bad stuff. This principle, also an admonition, has served as a practical guide for me in coping professionally with a host of family relationships. This includes issues faced as a Navy chaplain. Some form of this concept has doubtless worked its way into millions of homes across the world at one time or another. The phrase is a useful teaching tool for parents attempting to keep their children from bringing home with them harmful worldly influences that can quickly outweigh their welcome. We examine how, personally, our relationships in the workplace and even in our society go bad. Holding grudges is both common and destructive. What is to be done about it? I address the bad stuff of grudges and lasting bitterness. How to avoid their invasion into our lives, and, if they do find their way in, how to get rid of them. First, don't be excessively stressed over them. For example, family drama is inevitable because we are naturally and easily caught up in finding fault, thinking that we got the short end of something. As a family therapist, I found that the withholding of angry feelings was common. The most important rule for aging well is a refusal to accept any grudge against us. We must understand that many prefer feelings to facts, fantasizing within their ego that their grudge is somehow going to hurt us. The grudge is entirely self-generated and self-justified. Moreover, once continued, the grudge becomes addictive and searches for additional justification. The longer held, the more impossible the change. By not stressing over a grudge, I do not mean that we should never accept negative feedback or criticism about ourselves. Part of a healthy, ongoing relationship is that we will be upfront about feelings and not store those that are hurtful. Having heard the complaints of many hundreds of couples, it is my assessment that grudges, and grudge holding, are the #1 cause of marriage failure. We can go from one divorce to the next without realizing that it is our self-generated grudge holding that is the root cause. In my 80,000 hours of listening as a therapist, I found that most people are unwilling to develop an observing self that can understand and manage their defensive ego. I remember one husband who refused to accept any negative criticism or feedback from his wife, over many years telling her that if she did not like it, she could leave. He was forcing her to store her feelings. After 20 years of marriage, she finally decided that leaving was the best option. He was devastated, but there was no hope at that point. She had built a mountain of pain that was far too huge to get rid of. I have known several veterans whose grudge-held anger hounded their lives. One blinded veteran sitting beside me at a dining table at a residential blind rehabilitation center, BRC, was already angry with many things and was prepared to add additional layers to that anger, as other negatives inevitably came his way. George, not his real name, confided to several of us that his wife was always angry toward him, demonstrating that his anger was not operating in a vacuum. If we had not been so shocked when George stood up during a meal to angrily challenge a veteran across the table from him, demanding that they step outside and duke it out, the rest of us could have said, "If you do that, George, where will you park your guide dog?" My multiple BRC experiences found other examples. Another piece of S blankety blank, the blind veteran announced each time he lifted the cover to his food tray. He did this without exception. Then, he would pick at the so-called S blankety blank for 5 or 10 minutes before getting up to leave. We were certain he had another source of food, because he hardly ever ate anything. He also never engaged in any table conversation. I eventually picked up my tray and moved to another table. He was an intimidating, negative presence for our meals. Another veteran I knew for many years began collecting grievances at an early age. He had a hoard of grudges and was always ready to find fault with others in some way, shape, or form. He never made any attempt to maintain a friendship, so he was a loner. He died of a stroke and heart attack in his early age 70s, due, in my opinion, to his lifetime of collecting grudges. So insecure was he that the only way he could feel okay was to find fault in others. Several years ago, I undertook a personal survey of the VA Blind Rehabilitation Service professionals, with whom I could communicate to discover how many veterans came to them with a negative attitude. The responses ranged from 10% to 90%, with the average being right around 50%. This means that roughly half of all veterans with sight loss are dealing with grudges. The more grudges there are, the more crooked the world is perceived to be, and the more damage we do to ourselves. Preventing and overcoming. A healthy relationship will welcome feedback and even criticism because the parties are all flawed, imperfect human beings. Anyone can misinterpret, step on another's toes, and cause hurt without even realizing they are doing so. But once the feedback is stated and accepted, it should remain there forever. There is no benefit in regurgitating it. Therapists invented a word for reliving and regurgitating bad stuff: catastrophizing. For a relationship to be healthy, it is imperative that grudges be placed in the unacceptable category. If they are not, grudge holders are simply reminding themselves of the hurt and giving free rent to the feeling, which will, over time, magnify it and make it larger in the mind than it really is. Grudge holding can now be a form of gaslighting if there is open anger toward another person without an adequate explanation for that anger. What do we do when someone holds a grudge against us? Properly, we should tell the party in question that we take no responsibility whatsoever for their grudge holding. They have created it and they are maintaining it. We may need to remind them that their continued focus on their view of what happened may not be the real facts of the situation. Even if their view is correct, they should own up to the responsibility to face us with their thoughts and feelings, rather than holding and sucking on them. If they choose the latter, this is, in fact, an adult pout and self-justified sulking, a meanness employed to control another. It can be compared to a child sulking for attention. Returning to our own tendency to hold a grudge, we must be aware that the flaw has no redemptive, healthy effect. It tends to make us more negative about our past. Too often people will say something like, "I cannot forgive because I cannot forget." It is true that we cannot forgive as long as we allow the hurt to be reviewed in our brain and our heart. But forgiving is not simply forgetting. It is also to refuse, repeatedly, to give the negative thought any space between our ears. When we stop giving it energy, it soon ceases to have any energy, and we do not need or want it any longer, nor is it part of the healthy functioning of our heart. We can let things go by refusing to give them any attention. They will then slowly retreat and subside in our memory bank. We have an observing self that can refuse to listen to our ego-driven reactive brains. This is what learning to meditate is all about. Grudges can also be termed resentment collecting, a holding of anger in a passive-aggressive manner. They affect physical, mental, and emotional health. Research has shown that those who engage in holding grudges are habitually cutting off years of their own lives and perhaps those of others, as they also can backstab, enabling a climate of mistrust and hatefulness. Personal observations: where we are headed. For me, at age 94, fortunately married nearly 55 years and blessed with children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, I take no responsibility for anyone's grudges. Admittedly, I was not a perfect parent. No parents are perfect, but, like so many others, I did the best I could at the time. Therefore, this emotional past is behind and even dead to me. I have no regrets because I did the best I could at the time. The rest is forever gone by free and unbounded grace. If we are deeply wounded, profoundly hurt, or even traumatized by family relationships or experiences with romantic love or faith relationships, mindful prayer and thoughtful consideration in that case need to be undertaken for ourselves, not for the sake of the other person. What then is my takeaway from 50 years of listening to personal problems tied to grudges? My answer is that grudge holding is natural, universal, inevitable, and now very pertinent to our national situation. There is massive grudge holding, with feelings being preferred over alternative facts by many millions of Americans who seek conspiracies to justify the grudge holding. Each year brings record-breaking totals of teenagers engaging in violence and committing suicide despite increases in mental health help. We are a nation in crisis. Grudge holding so greatly energizes mistrust, fear, hate, and violence. Can we not recognize this and do something more about it? Blind, no pun intended, grudge holding, for me, is the primary source of our distrustful climate. Our democracy is based on mutual trust. Grudge holding undermines trust and the give and take of healthy relationships. This is a poison for any society. Our nation cannot continue to be healthy if the consistent spread of widespread grudge holding continues. Is there any chance this country can wake up to what is happening to destroy the mutual trust necessary for our democracy? The remedy must lie with each of us. Addendum. Parents' Prayer. Lord, help me to live long enough to become the same problem to my children as they once were to me. This is my pay it forward for all besieged, imperfect parents. Amen. The aforementioned graphic is a half-page grayscale shaded box containing large numbers of snowflakes of different sizes at the top, and a few scattered flakes on the side and at the bottom of the box. The white flakes contrast with the gray background. At the far left in various font sizes and styles is the following: Happy Holidays and a Joyful New Year. Further to the right, still within the box, is the following longer message, all in one size and all italicized. The BVA National Board of Directors and Headquarters staff send best wishes for a joyous holiday season to our members and their families, our generous sponsors and supporters, and all other stakeholders whom we consider dear friends.